Welcome, everyone. My name is Andrew, and today we are doing a live MPT. So we're going to do this under time circumstances. And we chose 2016. I just had a student in the class pick a random year, so you could know that this is random. There's been no preparation for it. It's just, what would I do if I saw a live MPT? So I'm just sitting down. I got an hour and a half to write. I'll call this MPT workshop. And what's it going to be like to actually write an MPT? All right, so here's the thing that we got. The preface and the description and the instructions, we can kind of skip over that. We know exactly how we should be writing this by now, and then we'll go right into the file. So, first we want to read the file. So to examinee from Della Gregson partner 20 July 26, 2016, regarding the Barbara Worley matter. So our client Barbara Worley is renting a house. She's a little over halfway through a 1-year residential lease and has encountered several problems with the house. Miss Worley would prefer not to move in once the conditions repaired. She needs to know her options under new Franklin law to remedy each condition. In Franklin, specific statutes govern the landlord-tenant relationship. Both landlords and tenants have certain statutory duties in addition to any duties that they may have under the lease. Please draft a memorandum to me, um, analyzing and evaluating Ms. Worley's options with regard to each of the unrepaired conditions, which are described in the attached client interview summary. If more than one option is available with regard to a specific condition, explain the potential advantages and disadvantages of each. If an option is not available to Ms. Worley with respect to a particular condition, briefly explain why. Do not include a separate statement of facts, but be sure to incorporate the relevant facts, analyze the applicable legal authorities, and explain how the facts and law affect your analysis. So this is the assignment, right? So like I want to make sure that I'm answering this particular question. Like that's what I need to keep referring back to is the fact that like that's what they want me to do. And I don't want to stray from the assignment. I want to do exactly what they tell me to do. So her options with regard to the unrepaired conditions, um, explain the advantages and disadvantages of multiple options, and if no options available, explain why. Okay. Then I like how they set this up. Oh no, they don't. So this one they don't give us a like uh what a memo would look like. So we're just gonna set this up on our own, right? So to um Della Gregson partner, right? Try to make it Times New Roman. To Della Gregson partner from examinee regarding Barbara Worley matter, and then today's date. And they said we're gonna go right to the facts, right? Like, I mean, right to the discussion. We're not going to include the facts. So I might start off by just saying like what this memo will do. This memorandum will analyze and evaluate Miss Worley, we'll call her W, options with regard to each of the unrepaired conditions. Zoom in a bit. Um, I'll just kind of paraphrase this too. If more than one option is available with regard to a specific condition, this memo will explain the potential advantages and disadvantages of each option. If an option is not available, W with respect to a particular condition, an explanation why no option is available will be included. I kind of do that just to like frame it and be like, okay, I know exactly what I'm supposed to write. No separate statement of facts, but incorporate them, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Um, so yeah, it'll probably be, condition one, condition two, condition three, etc. I just have a feeling, and you can always go back and change it if that's not how it is, but like you really want to frame yourself as much as possible. And it seems like, okay, I already have um I already have a framework for this, right? I'm just gonna write about these different conditions and then talk about what options are available with regard to the unprepared conditions. And if no options available, then why is that the case? Okay, our client Burley Barbara, we already did that. Okay. Today I met with Barbara Worley regarding her dispute with her landlord over repairs needed to the rental house where she resides. This memorandum summarizes the interview. In January of this year, she rented a three-bedroom, two-bathroom house from Sean Spears. She attached lease. Worley is the only occupant in the home. She has a dog, Bentley. She and Spears agreed to a separate pet addendum to the lease that she's allowed to have a dog. Worley provided a copy of the pet addendum in her next agreement. The house has 8 rooms: kitchen, living room, master bedroom with a bathroom, two additional bathrooms, one additional bathroom, and a laundry room. The master bathroom is accessible through the master bedroom. The second bathroom is in the hallway between the second and third bedrooms. She uses one spare bedroom as her home office and the other as a guest room for her family and friends when they visit her, 1 or 2 visits per month. Worley's experienced a number of problems with the residents. About 2 months after she moved in, the toilet in the second bathroom began leaking. Okay, so that's probably the first one. Um, condition one, let's say leaking toilet in the bathroom. Okay. About 2 months after she moved in late March, she began having problems with the outdoor sprinkler system not functioning. Okay. Condition two, outdoor sprinkling system not functioning. In May, she noticed a smell in the guest room. The smell is coming from the carpet near the sliding glass door leading to the bedroom from the backyard. The carpet is damp, and there's a half-inch gap between the bottom of the door and the door frame. Worley isn't sure whether the door is off its track, or the door is too small for the door frame. She's not opened the door since she moved in. The door is currently in closed position, but she isn't sure whether any of her houseguests may have used the door. When she discovered the gap between the door and the door frame and tried to open the door wouldn't budge. She has placed a plastic bag along the door frame to try to keep outside moisture from coming in, to no avail. The carpet near the sliding door is increasingly discolored and smelly, and she has noticed mold growing around the door. The smell is so bad that no one can use the room. Okay, so uh moldy guest room with odors. Okay. Worley keeps Bentley in the laundry room on weekdays while she's at work because the laundry room door exits to the backyard and has a doggy door that allows Bentley to go in and out of the laundry room throughout the day. Bentley's a golden retriever and sometimes get bored when Worley's at work and chews on things. 5 days ago, Worley realized that Bentley had sneaked along the side of the washing machine next to the wall and chewed away a 2-foot strip of the baseboard and edge of the wall above the baseboard. She has since moved the washing machine closer to the wall to prevent Bentley from having access to the chewed area. Since Spears allowed Worley to have a dog at the house, she would like to have him take care of the repairs to the wall and baseboard as well as possible. So wall and baseboard repairs in laundry room. Okay. Okay. They were caused by Bentley the dog. So we have 4 conditions so far. I mean, this one, it's easy to outline, right? Like we just have to write about these conditions and they tell us exactly what the conditions are in the first file piece. Worley has notified the Spears of the toy sprinkler system, guest bedroom, sliding door, and carpet, but she has not made repairs. So being a little bit more specific here. Okay. Worley is now considering making arrangements herself to have the repairs completed. She has obtained an estimate from a handyman and a copy which is attached. She paid her rent on time every month. The cost to rent a two-bedroom house in the area is 1,000. The average cost to rent a three-bedroom house is 1,200, what she's currently paying. Okay. Really does not want to leave their home because she is close to the workplace and a desirable neighborhood with limited rental options. All right, fair enough. So here's the lease agreement. Um, it's made and entered into the first between them. There's consideration. She's going to rent it. She desires to lease use for private residence. Okay, from the 1st to the 31st, 1,200 a month, pay on the 3rd. Pets, no animals are allowed unless authorized by separate pen addendum. They'll pay $25 per day per animal as additional rent for each day tenant violates the animal restrictions by keeping an unauthorized animal. They may remove or cause to remove any unauthorized animal. It does say tenant is responsible for any damage or required cleaning to the premises caused by any unauthorized animal, but it seems like this animal is authorized on the pet addendum. Security deposit, 1,200. The landlord may deduct reasonable charges from security deposit, excluding normal wear and tear, and all reasonable costs associated with repairing the premises. Okay. If the premise becomes totally or partially destroyed during the term of the agreement, the landlord or tenant may terminate this agreement immediately upon 3 days written notice to the other. Okay, property maintenance. So general responsibilities, the tenant shall keep the property clean, dispose of all garbage, not leave windows or doors in open position during inclement weather, promptly notify landlord of all needed repairs. Tenant will water the yard at appropriate times and maintain the yard. If the tenant vacates before the end of the lease, the landlord may hold the tenant responsible for all rent payments due for the balance of the lease, subject to any remedies available. Okay, so it's pretty standard lease. I mean, nothing too crazy. It just maybe from this, what we'll take away is that, you know, the pet thing and the property maintenance, right? Especially not to leave the windows or doors in an open position. And it did say here that the door, um, she's not sure whether the door is off track or too small. She's not opened it since she moved in, but isn't sure whether any of her house guests may have used the door. Okay. All right. Now we got email correspondence between Barbara and the landlord. Hi, Sean. Last weekend, I noticed some water on the floor in the hall bathroom. So this is February 19th. Between the toilet and the shower, I think the toilet might have a leak. Can you please stop by the next couple of days to see the toilet is leaking? I'll put a towel down and make sure to keep it dry. So 8 days later, my oldest son just got married. I'm back in town. I'm snowed in. I should come by the weekend. Would it work? All right. I left two messages that Sarah was good for me, and I waited at the house until 2 p.m. He never showed up. The toilet leak is getting worse. I put a plastic bucket behind the toilet to catch the water dripping. Please stop by as soon as you can. I'm home most weekdays. And then again, March 31st. So now it's been several weeks. Never called back about the leaking toilet. It needs to be fixed. It's so bad they have to empty the bucket twice a day. The sprinkler system in the front yard stopped working, so now she's noticed that. So you have to water the front flower beds by hand 2 or 3 times a week. It takes 15 to 20 minutes. It's a real hassle in the hot weather. I don't see any leaks. So the sprinkler box has malfunctioned. Can you please figure out what's wrong and get them fixed? Barbara, sorry for the delay, but I've got a lot on my plate right now. I promise I'll get by the house to check on everything as soon as I can. Please hold down the fort. I got your voicemail saying you would stop by this weekend. This is April 27th. I'll be out of town, but anytime on Sunday would work for me. See you Sunday. What happened Sunday? I thought you were going to stop by. If you can't make it, please have the courtesy to let me know. And in May, I've been very patient. The toilet has been leaking for 3 months. The sprinkler's not working. There's a bigger problem. The carpet is wet and smelly. The smell is so bad I can't even use it. Plus, the mold is going around the door. It can cause health problems. I think the door and the carpet need to be replaced. Maybe didn't take seriously the other problems I reported, and that's why I haven't made other repairs as question. But now a whole room in the house is unusable. Why should I pay rent for a three-bedroom house when all I'm really getting is a two-bedroom house? I have to sleep on the living room couch. My guess, if you don't make arrangements, I'm going to look into making repairs myself and take appropriate legal action. I can't hold down the fort any longer. Okay. So that's May 26th. It seems like, from February 19th to May 26th, there's been a lot of notice and no action. So here's a handyman receipt, or at least an estimate. The toilet's 200, the sprinkler's 300, the door would be 1,800, and the carpet, the laundry room thing would be 300. So, you know, yeah, right. I mean, I guess it was 2016. In 2025, this would be like way more expensive for all this stuff. Okay. So the estimate is $2,600 in damages. All right, that wasn't so bad. I mean, just she has notice of all these things. She hasn't gotten them fixed. And you know, this is what it will cost to get them fixed. That's what we kind of teased away from the first few documents. All right, now we have the case file. So the lesser of a building intended for human occupation must put it in a condition fit for such occupation and repair all subsequent conditions that render it untenable. Okay, I mean, I like that. That's 540. I think we'll just take that as like something we're going to need to include, right? Okay. A dwelling shall be deemed untenable for 540 if it lacks and the following uh, effective waterproofing and weather protection of roofing exterior walls, including unbroken windows and doors, plumbing or gas facilities, maintain a good working order, heating facilities, maintain a good working order, electrical, lighting, wiring, and equipment, maintaining good working order, floors, stairways, and railings, maintaining good working order, interior spaces free from insect or venom infestation or vermin infestation. So here, it's it's a untenable dwelling because of 1 and 2, right? Like these things are not okay, right? It's untenable because of 541. So I'm just taking some of this stuff because I know I'm going to include it somewhere, right? Like under this statute, this needs to occur and it hasn't occurred here. So 542, the remedy, if a landlord neglects to repair conditions that render a premise untenable within a reasonable time after receiving notice from the tenant of conditions for each condition, the tenant may, I mean, these are all the different remedies. If the cost of such repairs does not exceed 1 month's rent of premises, make repairs and deduct the cost of repairs for the rent when due. Okay, I mean, the total cost of repairs is 2,600 and the monthly rent is 1,200. So like individually, some of these repairs are less than the rent, but overall it's more. So you would have to pick and choose if she were to do that, right? Like she couldn't do this one on her own, but the other ones she could do 2, 5, 3, 8. She could do all the other ones on her own and seek to have them paid for. Okay. Um, If the cost exceeds one of the rent, make repairs and sue the land for the cost of repairs. Vacate the premises, in which the case the tenant shall be discharged from further payment or rent. Withhold a portion of all the rent until the landlord makes relevant repairs, except when the tenant may only withhold an appropriate portion of the rent if the conditions substantially threaten the tenant's health and safety. Okay, so these are all the uh, things that she can do. I mean, we're not going to necessarily use all of these um in our response, but you know they are the options. They're very important. So like I'm just putting them on my page for right now because I'm going to refer back to them for sure. Um, if the exercise of these remedies leads to an eviction action and justified use of the remedies in a section is affirmative defense, it may shape the tenant's relief in the event it's determined that the landlord breached section 540. For the purpose of this section, if a tenant makes repairs more than 30 days after giving notice, the tenant is presumed to have acted after a reasonable time. A tenant may make repairs after shorter notice if the circumstances require shorter notice. If the tenants, I like that too. I mean, that's just gonna come into play here because some of these things she has given 30 days notice for. Um, the tenant's remedies under subsection A shall not be available if the condition was caused by violation of subsection 543, which we'll see right here. The remedies provided in this section, in addition to any other remedy provided as chapter, surrounding agreement, or applicable statutory or common law. Okay, so no duty on the part of the landlord to repair shall arise under 540, The tenant is in violation of any of the following affirmative obligations, provided the tenant's violation contributes materially to the existence of a condition or interferes materially with the landlord's obligation under section 540 to effect necessary repairs. To keep the part of the premises which the tenant occupies and uses clean and sanitary as a condition the premise permits, to properly use and operate all electrical, gas, and plumbing fixtures and keep them as clean and sanitary as their conditions. And then this one, not to permit any person or animal on the premises to destroy, deface, damage, impair, remove any part of the dwelling on the facilities, equipment, or appurtenance thereto. So, this right here is going to come in to play. I mean, we can even put this one already with Bentley the dog because it's going to be this right here. That's going to probably preclude recovery for this because, um, the dog caused it, and it said that if the animal, you know, uh, if the animal defaces or impairs it, then there's no duty on the landlord to repair. So this one's going to be the one that's probably going to have the least duty of the landlord to repair. And then an eviction action involving residential premises in which a tenant has raised as an affirmative defense a breach of the landlord's obligation, the court shall determine whether a breach has occurred. If the court finds a breach has occurred, they shall order the landlord to make the repairs, order the monthly rent to be reduced, and award the tenant possession of the premises. If the court determines there's been no substantial breach, the judgment shall be entered in favor of the landlord. A substantial breach means a failure of the landlord to maintain the premises with respect to those conditions that materially affect a tenant's health and safety. So I like that, 550. I mean, there's just a lot of language that we can get from these statutes. Like without even reading the cases, we already have some strong arguments that like the landlord needs to fix these things and there's been a material breach, right? A substantial breach. All right, so now we have, I teased out pretty much the language that I want to use from the different codes, right? And I've organized the essay how I want to write it, and now I gotta get some things from the case law. Okay, so defendant A appeals the judgment entered in favor of plaintiff R in the eviction action. The issue on appeal is whether the trial court misapplied the law when it found that the conditions proved to exist were non-substantial and therefore not a breach of the warranty of tenantability. So it found the conditions to exist were non-substantial. Landlord sought possession of the premises, forfeiture of the lease, and past due rent. Okay. Tenant asserted the defense of breach of warranty of tenantability sent forth in the Franklin Code and the right to withhold rent under 542A4. So just checking back, 542A4 was, withhold the rent and things like that. That was one of their remedies that they could have potentially taken. At trial, tenant testified that the roof and windows of the premises had leaked during the entire term of the tenancy and as a result had caused water damage to the walls and floors and had damaged her personal property. Tenant also testified that the thermostat was broken and that the shower leaked. Tenant offered in evidence several letters she sent to landlord complaining about leaking roof and other conditions, as well as photographs documenting the problems. Landlord denied receiving any letters, asserted that he had not been inside the premises since tenant moved in and did not have a key, and introduced before and after photos of repairs he made upon learning of tenant's complaints. The trial court found that the conditions were not substantial as defined in Franklin's Civil Code. Accordingly, it entered judgment for the landlord. All right, now here's a case within a case. Sometimes these are good things to copy. In Gordon versus Centralia Properties, the Franklin court held that in every residence there's an implied warranty of tenantability. In Gordon, the Franklin Supreme Court further held that tenant who proves that the landlord has breached the warranty of tenantability is entitled not only to maintain premises of the possession of the premises, but also to an appropriate reduction of rent corresponding to reduced value. The Gordon court further held that tenant is not entitled to reduction in rent for minor violations that do not materially affect the tenant's health and safety. I mean, that's the case within the case, but it's good language. I'm gonna, take note of it, right? Maybe we'll be able to use that. The Gordon decision is codified in the Franklin Code under the statutory scheme. When a tenant breaches a warranty of tenantability as a defense in an eviction case, the trial court is required to determine whether a substantial breach has occurred. 542B and 544A. If the court finds there's been a substantial breach, it shall order the landlord to make the repairs and correct the conditions caused by the breach, order that monthly rent be reduced in an appropriate amount, and award the tenant possession of the premises. So, I mean, we've already kind of taken that language, but here we can take the language right from the case, right? And again, I'm just kind of making like a note sheet at the top of like things that I think I'm going to use. Section 540 requires that the landlord of the building intended for human occupation put it in a condition fit for such occupation, repair all subsequent damages that render it untenable. Under 541, a dwelling is untenable for human occupancy if it lacks effective waterproofing and weather protection of roof and exterior walls, plumbing maintained in good working order, heating facilities maintained in good working order, and floors maintained in good repair. So again, we already have this, whether we're going to take it from the case or we're going to take it from the statute, we'll decide. So this case, just so we know, is Buck v. Harris. And again, like I'm not necessarily going to use all of these, quotes. I'm just like teasing out the ones that are like, you know, pretty important. So here, the trial court found that the premise was not properly waterproof from the outside elements. The thermostat did not work. The shower leaked. The trial court erred when it concluded they were non-substantial. These conditions were not merely cosmetic defects of convenience, but affect tenants' health and safety. I like that quote right there. Um, right. And so now we already know that we want to, compare our case to this case and say it's pretty much the same thing, right? That it's untenable, it's not merely cosmetic, it's substantial. In that case, it was the roof and whatever. In our case, it's this, very similar, and therefore the court should arrive at the same conclusion, right? To determine the appropriate reduction in rent, they must either measure the difference between the fair rental value of the premises, if it had been warranted, and the fair rental value as they were during occupancy in unsafe or sanitary conditions, or reduce a tenant's rental obligation by the percentage corresponding to the relative reduction of use of the leased premises caused by the landlord's breach. Again, I mean that's good language because we're supposed to talk about our options. So, that could potentially be the options that we're gonna utilize, right? Additionally, the trial court must order the landlord to make the repairs necessary under the statute. There's issues for trial court to determine rent, reverse, or remand it. Okay, so this case, I mean, we can just say like it's a lot like our case. Why? Because there was similar issues, um, leaking roof and damage to that thermostat, right? So, and then they said that they were material, right? It was not properly waterproofed. Thermostat did not work, and the shower leaked. Those are the issues that happened in Buck v. Harris, and we want to compare them to our issues, right? I'm gonna kind of bold that because like that's where you get most of your points, comparing the facts of the other cases to your facts and either aligning our case with the facts or distinguishing our case from the facts. We can certainly align them here, right? They had, a leak, we had a leak. It was, untenable, ours is untenable, same thing. All right, let's just see how many cases there are. Oh, that's it. This is nice and easy, only two cases, right? I think this is a super manageable MPT. But the difficulty of is writing it in an hour and a half and then moving straight forward to the next one, writing in an hour and a half. You got to really be quick. There's no time to like overthink things. You just got to take from it, put it together, and then kind of, mold it as you write it, right? Like you can't just have a perfect plan and then start writing. You're gonna have to like, put together a plan, write it, and then kind of, adjust and make changes maybe as you go. All right, so now we have Shavers Willowbrook. After suffering through two separate bedbug infestations in his apartment, plaintiff Jordan Shea moved out and filed a complaint against his landlord. All right, bedbug infestations, seeking to recover rent he had paid and out-of-pocket expenses. After a bench trial, the court found that Willowbrook responsible for the first infestation, but not the second. Okay. So if award share a fraction of the damages he sought, limiting his recovery to document out-of-pocket expenses and declining any award and rent recovery. Shea appeals. The facts are as followed. Within a few days of entering a 6-month lease, there was insect bites were discovered bed bugs. He reported this, which sprayed, replaced, and cleaned thoroughly. While this work was being done, he stayed in a nearby hotel for several months after Wilbrook cleaned his apartment. Shea experienced no bed bugs, so he believed the problem had corrected. He renewed the lease, then he departed for a study abroad program. When he returned, the bed bugs were coming again. The bed bug continued throughout the renewal period, but he failed to report the second infestation. He finally moved out 2 months before the end of his lease. Okay, so here Shea, he failed to report it. So let's take that from the Shea case because that's going to be something different, right? The difference is all of these things have been reported, right? Shea v. Willowbrook Properties. But we kind of getting the facts from Shea v. Willowbrook here that, they didn't provide notice. The trial court denied his claim that he's entitled to full refund of all the rent he had paid over the course of his tenancy. When a landlord breaches the warranty of tenantability and creates an untenable property, as alleged here, the tenant has several options: repair and deduct the cost of the repairs. If the cost of repairs is less than 1 month's rent, repair and sue. If the cost of repairs exceed 1 month's rent, vacate the premises and be discharged of paying further rent, or withhold some of the rent if the landlord does not make the repairs, provide the conditions substantially threaten the tenant's health and safety. So again, like, we might use this quote, we might use it from the statute, we might use it from the other case, but like that's a nice language right there, right? We were definitely going to talk about these options. So in his lawsuit, Shea sought to recover all the rent he paid pursuant to his initial and renewed leases. We believe that trial court correctly declined to award Shea the rent requested. First, the evidence supports the conclusion that Willowbrook's effort to address the first infestation were successful. Shea even renewed his lease for another 12 months, from which the trial court concluded the apartment was free of the infestation. Thus, there's no factual basis to show Shea awarding damages for rent paid in 2010 in the first lease. Nor is there a basis to award damages with respect to the second bedbug infestation, which arose in 2011 after he returned from abroad. Shea failed to demonstrate that the prolonged bedbug infestation was Willowbrook's fault, and though through no fault of his own. If Shea was responsible, he would have been obligated to resolve the issue himself. Right? The landlord has no duty to repair if the tenant has breached an affirmative obligation to keep the premises clean and sanitary as a condition of premises permits. If Shea believed that his landlord was responsible for the bedbug infestation, he had an obligation to mitigate the damages by promptly notifying Willowbrook to give it an opportunity to resolve the problem. Right? And now they're quoting the earlier case, right? So I like this quote, like when one case refers back to another case that you already did, there's something important to it, right? Yeah, so it's just like they're citing the other case, and that's how this all fits together. We're trying to like see like how does all the information they've given us fit together. Since this did not occur, they declined to find Willowbrook responsible for the second infestation, include that he was not entitled to vacate the premises under 542A3. Because Shea retained possession of the apartment and reaped the benefit of staying, he could have been held responsible for the remaining 2 months of rent under the lease had Willowbrook sought it. The trial court correctly declined to award Shea any damages related to rent already paid. We affirm the denial of the $16,000 rent reimbursement claim. Okay, because why? Because Shea retained possession of the apartment and reaped the benefit of staying, he could have been held responsible for the remaining 2 months of rent under the lease had Willowbrook sought it. Okay, and then out-of-pocket expenses. Shea also requested a total of $2,000 for motel and medical expenses he incurred while living in the apartment. However, he submitted a receipt only for $400 for the motel room he rented while his apartment was being sprayed in the bed bugs during the infestation in 2010. He provided no further documentation of his claim expenses. Therefore, the trial court properly awarded him $400, but appropriately declined to award him $600 for medication because he provided no documentation or explanation of how he came to that number. So the out-of-pocket expenses, I think, are kind of important, right? Like, because we're going to claim we should get some out-of-pocket expenses, and it shows here that you get out-of-pocket expenses as long as you show documentation. All right, affirmed. And that's it. So anyone have any thoughts about this essay in the class? Like anything is easy, is it hard? Would you have any idea of where to go from here? Would you have done pretty much what I've done so far? Or like what are any thoughts that anyone has in the class?
I would say that my process is similar to yours, where like I was taught to just kind of create an outline and start typing the outline before, and so that way when you read, you just kind of plug and play. So I think it's a little fun in the sense that it's like a puzzle. It's just difficult when like the time or if the cases are like really old and it's hard to translate them to like plain English with the time that you have.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I mean, It's a little fun, right? Like, I'm teaching another class right after this, so I have like a long morning, and I was thinking, I was like, oh, is this gonna suck or not? And then like, it's not gonna be that bad, right? Writing an MPT is not a horrible endeavor. It really is. On test day, writing two MPTs in 3 hours, that's a horrible endeavor. But like, it's not that difficult. You just, like you said, you're creating a puzzle. You kind of have to read through some density sometimes. Like you said, there's some like, really tough cases or like what's the issue even? It's kind of like hard to address. But this one is fine. I mean, we're all familiar with the landlord-tenant issue, the stinky bathroom or the stinky rug. It's kind of like funny. They use the word smelly a couple times. Like it's not that bad. But then this part is kind of overwhelming. We're like, all right, I have this outline. I have all these, uh quotations that I think are important, but like, how do I go about even writing it? I think you just kind of jump into the deep end and be like, all right, let's begin. So, condition one, the leaking toilet in the bathroom, and then we got to remember, say, what are her, um, you know, uh, what are her options? Well, we kind of want to start with the, the civil code and just say what her options are, right? So pretty much. Uh, if a landlord neglects to repair conditions that render premise untenable, then these are the options that they have. So we'll do an IRAC, right? I think IRAC is the easiest way. So the first thing is um, the issue is whether what's our name M or W has any viable options related to the landlord's failure to repair the leaking toilet in the bathroom, right? That's the issue. The rule is, right, um, when a tenant breaches the warranty of tenantability and creates an untenable property, a tenant has several options, right? So, I mean, we could just take this language right here and I'll exit out, right? So when a landlord breaches the warranty of tenantability and creates an untenable property, a tenant has several options. Repair and deduct and then I'll say Shea v. Willowbrook, and then Franklin Civil. I mean, when you're doing the citations, you don't have to be that good at it. Like that's fine. I cited Shea v. Willowbrook, which was quoting the Franklin Civil Code. But all I'm doing here is taking the rule of law, right? When a landlord breaches the warranty of tenantability and creates an untenable property, a tenant has several options. Repair and deduct the cost of repairs if the cost of repairs is less than 1 month's rent. Repair and sue if the cost of the repairs exceeds 1 month's rent. Vacate the premises and be discharged of paying for the rent, or withhold some or all of the rent if the landlord does not make the repairs, provide the conditions substantially threaten the tenant's health and safety. Okay, so issue, rule, analysis. We also wanted to see, are there any other rules like that are important, right? So if the court finds there's been a substantial breach, it shall order the landlord to make repairs and correct the conditions caused by the breach or things like that. Okay, so if a tenant makes repairs more than 30 days after giving notice to the landlord, the tenant is presumed to act in a reasonable time. They may make repairs on shorter notice. Okay. Um, and then we just talked about this right here. I like this one right here. So going back to it, additionally, um, according to the Franklin Civil Code, a dwelling shall be deemed untenable for purposes of 540 if it lacks any of the following: effective waterproofing and weather protection of roofing exterior walls, include unbroken windows and doors, plumbing and gas utilities maintained in good working order. Okay. that's like the issue and the rule. So here, W should be able to successfully argue that oh, and then you know what, I do want to put the last point where they talked about what's substantial, right? Um, where they said a substantial breach, right? Um, the Franklin Code defines a substantial breach as the failure of the landlord to maintain the premises or respect those conditions um, that materially affect the tenant's health and safety. And then um, something about the 30-day thing, right? Where it says if a tenant makes repairs more than 30 days after giving notice to the landlord, the tenant is presumed to have acted as reasonable time. So I'll go back there and say, finally, or not finally, just say, I like this phrase a lot. When I don't know what transition language to use, I say, it is also important to note that under the code, and we got that one from uh, Franklin Code 550C. Stop doing that. All right, I'm just gonna have to make it do that. And this one was, I think, 550 uh D, right? Yeah, 550 D. Okay. All right, so that's my, my rule statement right there, right? The issue is whether W has any viable options related to landlord's failure to repair the leaking toilet in the bathroom. When a landlord breaches the warranty of tenantability and creates an untenable property, a tenant has several options: repair and deduct the cost of repairs. If the cost of repairs is less than 1 month's rent, repair and sue. If the cost of repairs exceed 1 month's rent, vacate the premises and be discharged of paying further rent. Withhold some of the rent if the landlord does not make repairs, provided conditions substantially threaten the tenant's health and safety. Franklin, okay. Additionally, according to the Franklin Civil Code, a dwelling shall be deemed untenable for purposes if it lacks any of the following: effective waterproofing, plumbing and gas facilities. And the Franklin Code defines a substantial breach as a failure of the landlord to maintain the premises with respect to those conditions that materially affect tenant's health and safety. It's also important to note that under the code, if a tenant makes repairs more than 30 days after giving notice to the landlord, the tenant is presumed to have acted after a reasonable time. A tenant may make repairs after short notice if the circumstances require shorter notice. Okay, perfect. So then going into the argument here, W should be able to successfully argue that the leaking toilet is a substantial breach um, and that the uh, failure to maintain plumbing facilities in good working order renders the um, property untenable. Um, this notion is supported, right, by the facts of Buck v. Harris. Um, where they had something, right, where the leaking shower is comparable to the leaking toilet, right? where the leaking shower was considered not merely cosmetic defects, but that affected tenant's health and safety. So this notion is supported by the facts of Buck v. Harris, where one of the alleged conditions was a leaking shower, and the court determined that the conditions and then you could, change the quotes a little bit, but I would say like we're not merely cosmetic defects or matters of convenience, but affected tenants' health and safety, right? Um, W can also show that the landlord was put on effective notice as she emailed the landlord. Then we got to go back to the emails a little bit, right? We're just like plugging in from the facts. As she emailed the landlord February 19th, and it's now July 25th, right? The landlord on February 19th, 2016, and it has since been March, April, May, June, July. 5 months, and the toilet has not been repaired. And then anything else with the toilet, like just kind of state the facts, like the toilet has been for 3 months, right? Okay. Um, in fact, right, on May 26th, W emailed the landlord for the, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? For the sixth time since the initial email stating that the toilet had still not been repaired after 3 months, and there is clear evidence that the landlord had knowledge of the leaking toilet, but did not provide repairs, right? I mean, all that's pretty solid. So now, therefore, under Franklin law and um, under Franklin law and consistent with the courts, or consistent with the, let's say, the Buck v. Consistent with Buck v. Harris, let's say, therefore, under Franklin law and consistent with Buck v. Harris, W has a strong argument that the landlord breached the duty of tenability and is that they call it? Um, let's try and change this. So, therefore, under Franklin law, considered Buck v. Harris, W has a strong argument that the landlords, that the leaking toilet is a substantial breach, that it renders the property untenable, and that the landlord failed to make necessary repairs. Right now, we're just like, all this was just to kind of get to the point, which, remember, what the point is this right here: advantages and disadvantages of the options. What are the options with regard, and what are the advantages and disadvantages? Okay. W has multiple options in regard to this condition. And then remember, it says what the options were. The options, as we said, were to repair and deduct the cost of repairs if the cost is less than 1 month's rent. The first option is to repair the toilet herself and deduct, right? Like, I'm just gonna copy these repairs down here just so I can like refer back to them. So the first option is to repair the toilet herself and deduct the cost of repairs because the facts show that the cost of repairs is $200 based on the invoice from JB Handyman Services. And her monthly rent is $1,200, right? Okay. The advantage of this option is that she could immediately repair the toilet without having to wait for the landlord to act. She could then deduct the $200 from the following month's rent payment under the Franklin Code. I'd say the disadvantage of this option is that she would have to procure the repair herself, potentially sacrificing time to be present for the repair and having to coordinate directly with the repairman. Furthermore, this option may cause friction between her and the landlord when the rent payment is $200 less than usual, although it appears W is justified in doing so. Right? The second option, um, the second option that the second option of making I'll just say, since the cost of repair is only $200, the option of making the repair and suing would not be viable because the code requires the cost to exceed 1 month's right. I might actually make this one 1 month's rent in order to repair and sue. However, W, since the total costs of repairs, including the other conditions, would amount to over $1,200, W could potentially procure repair for all of the conditions and then sue uh for the cost. However, if she were to address the conditions separately, the cost of the toilet would not be enough to justify repairing and suing. The benefit of this, of the option of making all of the repairs and suing, is that she could get she could handle all of her issues in one proceeding. However, the disadvantage would be having to potentially hire a lawyer and incur costs related to litigation. Another option W may consider would be to vacate the premises and be discharged of paying further rent. This option has its disadvantages, however, because W stated in her emails, or because W claimed that she wants to remain in the home due to its proximity to her work, and since there are not many suitable homes available for rent in the area. Furthermore, if she vacated the premises, she would likely not be able to recuperate her losses incurred over the past few months, although she could still potentially sue for damages and expenses after the fact, after she moved out. And then finally, her last option would be to withhold some or all of the rent since the landlord has not made repairs and since the condition substantially threatens her health and safety. This option has the advantage of encouraging the landlord to make the repairs himself, which would alleviate the need for her to procure repairs and coordinate with the handyman. However, the disadvantage is that the landlord would still need to make the repairs, and it would also likely cause friction between W and the landlord when the landlord is not paid full rent. Since the repair is only $200, it may be most prudent for W to consider the first option, which is to make the repair herself and then to deduct the $200 from the next month's rent. Right. She could also potentially recover out of pocket expenses she incurred while the toilet was leaking. And then I'll go to this case. Right, because if she can provide documentation or an explanation of how she came to that number, right? Provided she can provide, if she can provide documentation or an explanation of how she arrived at the number of out-of-pocket expenses she incurred. Um, in Shay, the court held that these expenses must be shown to be awarded. So potentially, W could provide documentation of the expenses she paid, although it seems she only used a bucket to um, to mitigate the damages during the leak. Accordingly, she likely has no out-of-pocket expenses to recover, and her best option may be to repair the toilet herself and deduct the $200 from the following month's rent. All right. That's pretty solid. You see, I wrote a whole bunch for condition number one. Now for condition number two, three, and four, I don't need to write as much because um, it's pretty much already been uh discussed, right? Like what her options are, and I used the facts, right? So I'm gonna do is take this stuff. Right, I already have a pretty solid start. Now I'm going to condition number two. And I'm just going to put this stuff at the bottom where I might need it. Okay. The outdoor sprinkling system not functioning. Um, Pretty much the same argument, right? Like uh the premises is not properly waterproofing the outside elements, a thermostat did not work. Thermostat did not work is very similar to our case. And then in the other case, uh here, it was the bed bug thing. But let's go back to the facts. When did she say the thermostat was not working? Um, Toilet, my oldest son got married. It's getting worse. The sprinkler has malfunctioned. Okay, so that was March 31st. Okay. And now it's, more than 30 days later. Okay. So we'll go to this one. Um, the issue is whether W has any viable options related to the malfunctioning sprinkler system. As discussed above, um, tenants have uh, um, as discussed above, if a tenant can show that their building uh, is untenable, um, they untenable under this code. is untenable under this code. The tenant may do all these things, right? Um, the tenant is required to give written notice of the condition and um and okay, and if a tenant uh makes repairs more than 30 days after giving notice to the landlord, tenant is presumed to have acted in a reasonable time. And that was C. Here, W gave written notice of the written notice that the sprinkler system was not working on March 31st. And May 26th, May 26th, emailed the landlord to notify him again of the uh, of the condition. Therefore, more than 30 days have passed since proper notice was given, and W could choose to repair the condition herself, and the landlord would have been given proper notice. Okay. Now, uh, so proper notice. It is likely that this condition is considered substantial. Because it materially affects her health and safety. Um, and it's not her health and safety, although the landlord may argue that this breach is immaterial. Is minor and does not materially affect her health and safety. Is minor and does not affect her health and safety. On balance, in alignment with the facts of Buck v. Harris, Um, a Franklin court would likely determine that the breach is material because a sprinkler system um, is similar to um, a non-working thermostat, similar to a non-working thermostat, which the Buck court determined was a material breach. If the court found that the breach was not material, W would be limited in her options because the landlord has and then I'm going to quote remember the case within the case, the Gordon case, um, because a tenant is not entitled to reduction for this, right? Be limited because a tenant is not entitled to reduction in rent for minor violations that did not materially affect a tenant's health and safety. And then I would quote uh, Gordon v. Central Properties, Inc. However, assuming that the breach is material, W would have the same options available as she has in regards to the toilet leak. She could make the repairs and deduct the amount from the following month's rent because according to the invoice from the handyman, the cost of repairing the sprinkler system would be $300, which is less than the monthly rent of $1,200. As discussed with the toilet leak condition, since this amount is less than the monthly rent, the option of making the repair and subsequently suing the landlord is likely unavailable under Section 540A unless the repairs are made with the toilet and other conditions discussed below that would make the total amount of repairs above $1,200. However, since the amount of this repair is only $300, it alone would not justify the option of making the repair and suing. W also has the option of vacating the premises, as well as the option of withholding a portion of the rent until the landlord made the repairs. Similarly, makes the repairs. Okay. Kind of want to quote, right? You're supposed to use something from everything. So I kind of want to quote something from the discussion that she had, which was, she does not want to leave, right? Um, according to the summary of the interview from this to the interview summary, W does not want to leave her home because it's close to her workplace and is desirous with limited rental options. Therefore, the option of vacating the premises has significant drawbacks and would likely be a last resort. As discussed, making the repairs and suing may not be viable due to the cost of the repair, and it also would involve incurring legal fees and the legal process. Therefore, similarly to therefore, her best options are likely to make the repairs herself and deduct the cost from the rent. Her best option, rent or withhold the rent until the landlord makes the repairs. The first option requires her to pay expenses up front, which may present an issue from a budgeting perspective. The second option would require her to wait until the landlord makes the repairs, and given the landlord's history of failing to act, there is no guarantee as to when the repairs would be made. If she has the money available and it is not a significant burden, her best course of action in regards to the sprinkler system, similarly to her best option in regard to the leaking toilet, is likely to make the repairs herself and withhold the rent in the um in that amount. W may be able to collect um out of pocket expenses, particularly related to the additional expenses she incurred as a result of having to water the plants herself, but under um, under Shady Willowbrook, she will have to provide appropriate documentation and explanation. All right. I mean, and now again, like I'm taking a little bit longer than, the time that y'all would have because I'm like talking and writing at the same time. But like at some point you start feeling like, oh shit, I really need to start writing quicker and get through this because time is ticking and I don't want to impact my next uh essay by going over the limit too much with this essay. So now I really want to, get started on the next two conditions and just, I might have to you know, I might have to be a little bit less wordy when I write these things and just be, see above uh this is, the case. So Modi guest room with odors because of sliding door and carpet. Okay. So how will I do this quicker? I would probably just say same thing. The issue is whether W has viable options related to the condition of a moldy guest room because of the broken sliding door and the dampening of the carpet. Okay. Um, as discussed above, and now I'll just start super copying and pasting, right? I mean, with copy and pasting, you got to be careful. Like you see how I'm doing it, where I'm not just like copy pasting everything. I'm trying my best to like incorporate it, but like as time's ticking, copying and pasting is okay in some regard, but not too much. The lesser of a building intended for human occupancy must put into condition fit for such occupation, repair all subsequent conditions that um, render untenable. Um, furthermore, okay. So I'm kind of just putting all these things. Furthermore, under the code. And like I just know I'm not getting any points for this right now because I've already said this, but um it's just like I want to do this, right? If a tenant makes repairs more than 30 days after giving notice to landlord, tenants presumed to have acted after a reasonable time. A tenant may make repairs after short notice. The circumstances require short notice. And then perfect. I mean, whatever. I'm kind of like doing it quickly, but I'm just trying to like get my rule statements down, right? So here, we'll talk about it. So here, W has a very strong argument that the landlord's failure to remedy this condition is a substantial breach, especially because it renders one of the rooms uh, unusable, and because the mold presents a significant health concern. Right. Um, shit. Um, it is clear that this condition is not merely a cosmetic defect, but a true matter of health and safety. Okay. Uh, W has the same options available to her as she does in regards to the toilet and um what's the other thing? And sprinkler system. Sprinkler system, except in this case, because the quoted price of repairs for the call it the door and carpet for the door and carpet exceeds the monthly rent. The option of making the repairs and suing is um is more clear and may potentially be her best option. The reason is because if she made the repairs herself, withholding the entirety of the next month's rent would still not be enough to pay her back for the cost of the repairs. Amongst the options of making the repairs and withholding rent, making the repairs and suing, vacating the premises, or what was the fund repair? Or withholding rent until the repairs are made. The last option may have the most advantages here. The reason is because what did it say? $1,800? Yeah, $1,800. $1,800 is a significant amount of money to pay up front. And as discussed above, W has a desire to remain in the house. We want to talk about, has there been enough notice? So she gave notice on May 26th, right? And now it's June 23rd, or let's call it May 26th, and now it's July 26th. Okay. Um, it seems that over 30 days have passed since the landlord was given written notice of the condition via the let's say May 26th email, via the May 26th email. So any of the options should be available to W. The landlord may argue that W or one of W's guests actually caused the problem because W admitted, right? She did admit uh that she isn't sure if any of her house guests may have used the door, right? That admitted in the interview that she isn't sure whether any of her house guests may have used the door. However, this argument will likely fail because doors are supposed to be able to open and close, and W and her guests should not have been put in a position where opening a door would cause significant damage to the property. And then I'm like, oh shit, I gotta really, I'm teaching another class in 13 minutes. So I'm like, I really gotta, get moving. So I'd say, on balance, um, it is likely that W is entitled to relief for this condition, and her best option may be to withhold rent until the landlord makes the repair. However, if she is able to, well, did say for the first thing, oh no, she can't do that. It does not exceed 1 month's rent, so she can't make the repairs and deduct them. Since the cost of the repair is more than 1 month's rent, the option of making the repair and withholding the rent would not be available to her here. And I kind of like misquoted that earlier. I said, because the quota pressure, the reason is because she made the repairs herself, withholding the entire next rent would still not be enough to pay her back for the cost of repairs. In fact, under the statute or under the code, this option would not be available because it specifies um, that the cost of repairs must not exceed 1 month, right? The cost of repairs must not exceed 1 month. Amongst the options of making the repairs and withholding rent, making the repairs and withholding rent, which is not available here. Making the repairs and suing, vacating the premises, or holding rent until repairs are made. The last option may have the most advantage, not be available here. Okay. The best option is hold the rental and makes repair. The option of making the repairs and suing is her second best option. However, as discussed, this may involve a legal process that could be costly and or time consuming. However, the benefit of this option is that she could immediately have the premises repaired, which might be her greatest concern. Therefore, since making repairs and withholding rent or making repairs and subtracting the costs from rent is not available, and vacating the premises is not ideal, W should choose between withholding rent until repairs are made should choose between withholding rent permitted or making the repairs and suing for damages. Additionally, W may be able to recover out-of-pocket expenses if they are documented and explained. For instance, she may have a cause of action related to her inability to use the room, especially if she rented a hotel for her guests because the room was unavailable. All right, and then we're gonna go into the last one, which was condition 4. And again, like I'm really stretched for time here, so I just gotta kind of do my best. Wall and baseboard repairs in laundry room caused by Bentley the dog. Okay. The issue is whether W has any options related to the damage done to the laundry room under the Franklin Code. No duty on the part of the landlord to repair shall arise if the tenant's in violation of the firm obligations, but the tenant's not to permit any person or animals to destroy the face of the room. Okay. Here, W may be prevented from seeking relief from the landlord because the damage to the property was done by her dog, and under the code, there is no obligation for the landlord to make repairs when the tenant has permitted any animal to damage the unit, right? Although the pet was, although W and the landlord agreed to a pet addendum to allow Bentley to reside in the property, the landlord likely has no duty to make repairs that were caused by the dog. Therefore, in relation to this condition, W likely has no rights against the landlord, and her best course of action is to pay the handyman how much was it? To pay the handyman the $300 for the repairs. The $300 for the repairs. W could try to argue that this condition why'd you say that the dog was in there? He's chewing, sneaked along. That this condition was caused by the landlord. However, the facts show that she allowed the dog to stay in the laundry room, and that the dog damaged the property without any impact by the landlord. Therefore, W likely has no viable options in regards to fixing the wall and baseboard in the laundry room, except for paying for the repairs herself. Perfect. All right, and then I'd probably do this real quickly. Conclusion, right? And the conclusion would be W has various options. And remember, go back to the call of the question, right? With regard to the specific conditions, right? Has various options with regard to the specific conditions discussed in this memorandum. Ultimately, her best course of action may be to repair the toilet and the sprinkler system and deduct the amount from her rent, because this would allow for immediate relief, and she is entitled to this under the code. It would also allow her to remain in the home and not have to sue or wait for the landlord to make repairs. Her best course of action in relation to the fuck was it? In relation to the room, to the moldy room is probably to either make the repairs and sue, or to um withhold rent until the repairs are made. She cannot make the repairs and deduct the rent because of the overall cost, and she does not want to vacate. Both of these options have drawbacks, including having to undergo a legal process and having to rely on the landlord to make the repairs when the landlord does not have a good record of doing so. But given the cost of the repair, these are her only two options. In regards to all three of the foregoing conditions, she may also try to recover out-of-pocket expenses if she can show documentation and explanation. In regards to the condition of the walls and baseboard in the laundry room, W likely has no option other than to make the repairs herself, because the landlord has no duty to repair conditions caused by her animal. Respectfully, examining. All right. I'm going to share this in the classroom. I'm going to share this with all of y'all so you guys have access to it right now. I mean, I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts? I think I crushed it. I mean, that's pretty much how you want to do it. You want to just incorporate all the facts, set it all up, and then write as much as possible. So by the time you're done with it, it looks like really, really nice. I mean, if you have a little bit of extra time, you could like bold this and put it in the middle or something. I mean, things like that might be uh important, but at the end of the day, like, you're under a time crunch, and that's not super important. What's really important is just, incorporating the facts and writing everything down. Does anyone have any questions for me at all about this exercise? I've never done this before for an MPT. I've never actually sat down and wrote one in real speed in front of my students, but I think it's instructive. I mean, again, it took me a long time because I was talking and writing, but you really just want to get right to it and write a great MPT. Anyone have any questions at all? All right, cool.